tota sabelani, Emma tota sabelani, Emma tota mandani, Ayo lengos, city lengos, Emma tota sabelani, Emma tota sabelani, Abafazi bayalila, Ayo lengos, city lengos, Iyo lengos.
Morning all, and welcome to the first African Universities Gender Equality Forum created by the Shared Value Africa Initiative and the ITSNOTOK movement and co-hosted by our research partner, the University of Johannesbiurg. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Tikkie Barnard and I'm the founder and the CEO of the Shared Value Africa Initiative. I am a feminist, a gender equality activist, and I detest gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is not dependent on our culture, our background, our religion, the color of our skin, our education, how much money we have, the language we speak, where we live, or even the country we come from. Women have been abused for centuries, and gender-based violence is about power inequalities. And we as women need to take back our power for the sake of ourselves and our children. Like COVID, gender-based violence knows no boundaries and it's spread by human behavior. Gender-based violence is the most inhumane act that any human being can impose on another. And sadly, no vaccine can stop or eradicate gender-based violence. Only we as the human race can. Today's purpose for us as shared value practitioners and gender equality activists is to unite us all, the academia, civil society, government, private sector, and ordinary citizens, as we have the power to break this deadly grip of gender-based violence. Increasing gender equality will reduce gender-based violence. We need to fight for gender equality in our homes, in our families, in the workplace, and starting with equal opportunities, equal pay, and a chair at the decision-making table. Today is also about taking action as the academia and to motivate and inspire us all to reach out to each other, to collaborate and raise our voices, as gender-based violence is not okay. I'm on a strict time limit today, so let me introduce you to our Queen of Ceremony, rather than our Master of Ceremony, Dr. Mumbi Wachira from Strathmore Business School in Kenya. Mumbi and I have worked together for the last 3 years on research and on creating shared value executive learning programs. Like me, Dr. Mumbi believes that business has an enormous role to play in increasing gender equality in the workplace. Mumbi is a member of the Shared Value Africa Initiative Africa Council of 8. She is current head of participant engagement for the UN Prime Africa chapter. And last but not least, she's also a full-time accounting lecturer at Strathmore Business School. Mumbi is your host for the rest of the session and will share the speakers and the topics as we move through the sessions. And I just want to thank one and all of you for making the time today. And I hope that we will all leave here inspired to take action, no matter how small, to fight for gender equality. In closing, let's agree to stop judging each other. Let's agree to stop turning a blind eye. Let's agree to stop stereotyping. And let's agree to stop gender-based violence and raise our voices. And most of all, let's agree to love and respect each other. Thank you. Mumbi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Tikkie, for that very warm welcome. Some statistics. According to the United Nations, 137 women are killed each day by a member of their family or a partner. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, emerging data and reports from those on the front line indicates a sharp increase in all types of violence against women and girls. As academics, we feel it is not enough to simply observe and critique gender-based violence and inequality, but to be the force for change in prevention and awareness. We also recognize our essential role in pushing for equality in our own spaces of learning and beyond. I therefore welcome all of you joining from all over Africa and elsewhere to this timely discussion, and encourage all of you to participate and share with us your insights, your comments, and questions in the chat. I will now give an overview of the program that we have for you today. We have two main sessions. The first is a series of presentations from our academic experts. We will then follow that with a panel discussion and end with a final speech. First, we will have Ms. Lindy Dlamini, the Chief Executive Officer of the GBF Response Fund 1, followed by Ms. Elizabeth Datnall, the Executive Director of the Sexual Violence Research Initiative. We will then have a presentation from Professor Connie Davis, Associate Professor of Strategic Communication at the University of Johannesburg, closely followed by Dr. Oleboheng Selebi, Senior Lecturer at the University of Pretoria. We will then have Ms. Immaculate Mohotsi, Senior Research Fellow and Head of the Gender Training and Research Program from the University of Namibia, closely followed again by Dr. Hengiwe Ndlovu, postdoctoral researcher at the Center for Women and Gender Studies at Nelson Mandela University. Finally, we will have a presentation from Ms. Nonkosi Cholwana, Director for the Center for Diversity, Inclusivity, and Social Change at Cape Peninsula University of Technology. From there, we will then have our panel discussion, and we really welcome you to share your insights, your comments, your experiences, and we will try to address that in our discussion. Finally, we will have our last speaker, the Ambassador Nodzipo January Badil, who is a chairperson of the Council, Nelson Mandela University, and the chairperson of the United Nations Global Compact Local Network, South Africa. And then we will close. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome Lindy Dlamini, who is the CEO of the GBF Response Fund 1, a private sector-led fund set up as part of the national response to gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa. Lindy will speak to us about collaboration and the key to ending GBV. Welcome, Lindy. Thank you.
Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm absolutely delighted to be here this morning, albeit that the subject we're discussing is not a subject I still wanted to be talking about in 2021. In preparing for this session, thought back to my own university experience. I went to university at the University of Swaziland, now called the University of Eswatini, from 1988 to 1994, completing 2 legal degrees there. And my university experience was a wonderful one. It was liberating. It taught me to own my thoughts, to own my experiences, that my opinions are valid, that I should know how to contest arguments with other people and take my place and space as a young person who would be able to contribute to the vibrant society I was part of. The fact that when I completed my studies, South Africa was entering the democratic dispensation and I was ready to come home made my experience even sweeter. And yet, in the very first month of my very first semester of university, my roommate was raped. She was raped by a man that she knew as a friend and as a brother. And that said a couple of things to me. It said the space is not as safe as I thought it was. It said the goodwill is not the goodwill that I expected and thought I would be experiencing. That in fact, the protection of the brotherhood is not what I think it is. And that as women, we have to protect ourselves. We have to be on guard. And that's when I started to wear a suit of armor. My no-nonsense approach as a young lady, I made myself unapproachable. Every day I put on my emotional Kevlar vest, which was my vest and suit and armor against harassment and unwanted attention. Did I mention that at the time and throughout my university career, we had the most progressive vice chancellor, and it was a lady. She was the first female vice chancellor of the university, Professor Lydia Makubu, may her soul rest in peace. She passed about 2 weeks ago. And yet harassment was spoken of in hushed tones. Harassment was spoken of silently, and women really took ownership and took the blame for their experiences of harassment, whether by their peers or by lecturers. Fast forward to 6 years later, when I was doing my LLB, it made me write a thesis on sexual harassment and sex discrimination at the workplace. And in coming to talk today, I reflected back on the fact that this is 28 years ago. How much has changed from the impetus that propelled me to share those thoughts and to shape my thoughts around an alternative environment that I wanted us to have as women, an alternative experience. I was yet to enter the workplace, but I already expected hostility from the workplace. I already expected inequity and inequality in the workplace. And it's 28 years later, a lot has changed. There are a lot of progressive policies. But I shudder to say that the experiences of many, many young people are not markedly different from the ones that I had back then. I consider again the university experience. I am the mother of a gay son who has studied at New York University. And the first time that he mentioned that he was gay, he was about to go into university, the most overwhelming thought that I had as a mother was his safety being in America, in New York, and being gay in an era of Trump. I dare say, I don't think that that is a normal response and reaction, given the times. And yet here we were. We have solved so many technology challenges. We have solved so many challenges in this world. The pace of change in our world has changed in the last 20 years. The pace of change has been more than it's been in the last 100 years. And yet the fundamental societal norm and value that maligns the disadvantaged, the marginalized, and rises other people, and sees it fit to perpetrate violence based on the gender of other people. We've got to break the back of this scourge. We've got to eliminate it from our society. Coming today, I'm excited by the fact that we have got academics on the podium, and we're going to be sharing experiences, and we're going to be sharing solutions. And yet it was not lost on me that the conversation today is being led mostly by women about women's experiences, and it is women proposing a different way and a different path. So of course, we are not damsels in distress. We know that nobody's coming to save us, and we know enough about our own experience to know what it would take to shape a different experience for the next generation of women coming up. And I still ask myself though, why do we not have sufficient male voices talking about how enough is enough in this space? I hearken back to the days of old, where it was everybody's responsibility in a village to make sure that everyone in the village is safe. And in fact, the stronger and in particular the physically stronger, who tended to be the men, were the leading voices in providing safety in the village. Women were prioritized, children were prioritized, and yet here we are, having to fend for ourselves in everything. Is this the price of equality, I ask? Is this the price of demanding equity, parity, equality in the workplace, in society, in the economy? Has it meant that we turn the dial and men who were our lifelong allies since time immemorial are no longer our allies? Have they become our enemies in this space? And I would like at some point when we are having the panel discussions to really probe this a little bit more. Specifically then, if we talk about the workplace and gender equality in the workplace, it is particularly important because one of the things that renders women vulnerable to gender-based violence is systemic inequality. It is inequality in workplaces and workspaces. And when I talk workspaces, I'm really talking about in the informal economy, wherever women ply their trade. So I think that there is a responsibility on industry captains and leaders alike to take the mantle of activism on. Activism around gender equality and the elimination of workplace and societal conditions that keep women backwards and keep women oppressed. And so what would collaboration look like in an era like that and to solve a problem such as this? I only have to look at the example of the fund that I work for and represent, the GBVF Response Fund. The GBVF Response Fund came about because there was the overwhelming tide and swelling tide of women and social, civil society formations who felt we have had enough, enough is enough. The movement was really saying we have got to have a different future and we've got to work together to achieve it. But more importantly, we demand the accountability of leaders in our environment, starting with the government. And so it was that the total shutdown movement militated and ensured that a presidential summit was held in November of 2018 and really talked the length and breadth of all of these factors that lead to gender-based violence and keep women oppressed and in fear within their spaces. And that was a conversation that was co-creative and involved civil society, involved government, involved the private sector, and culminated in the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence. It's a co-created conversation amongst everybody who has a voice to contribute to the articulation of the problem, to the solving of the problem, to the eradication of the problem, but is equally invested in creating a different society for all of us. And so I think again today, we ought to have more male voices. We should put the challenge out there, that it is all of us. The problem affects largely women, affects largely children. But if it affects women and children, it affects everybody in society. Women are the pillars of homes, they're the pillars of society, they are raising the next generation, and a lot of households are led by women. Workplaces, majority is women. We deserve a society that really, really treats women better. I want to put it to you that a society that doesn't treat women well, and in fact, a society that is harmful to women is harmful unto itself. So I say again, I know no one is coming to save us, but certainly the space has got to be created for women to participate more fairly, more equitably in the economic sector. We deserve to not be excluded through knowledge asymmetry and information asymmetry in the various industries and workplaces through socially engineered practices that exclude women. So how do we leverage the working knowledge and understanding of all the parties who are invested in gender-based violence?
Apologies, we are running short of time.
I'm sorry about that. I was timing myself. We have academia. In academia, we have got a lot of research that tells us what the root causes of these problems are and how we start to engineer a society, starting with early childhood development and education. And we start to unlearn the social norms and values that have normalized the situation where women are treated in this manner. I think we need progressive policies supported by regulation and consequences. The time for talk is over, ladies and gentlemen. I want to take you back to the quote of Nelson Mandela as he opened the first parliament of 1994. He said, "Freedom cannot be achieved unless women have been emancipated from all forms of oppression." He said, "Our endeavors must be about the liberation of women and the emancipation of the man and the liberty of the child." So what will it be? Accept the invitation today to play an active and progressive role to accelerate the death of gender-based violence and femicide in our society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Lindy, for that very challenging and insightful presentation. I would now like to invite our next speaker, Elizabeth Dartnall, who is a current Executive Director of the Sexual Violence Research Initiative, a feminist and women-led NGO. The SVAI, with more than 6,600 members, is one of the largest networks in the field of research on violence against women and violence against children. Elizabeth will give us a presentation on the role academia plays in ending GBV from research to practice. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Mumbi, and thank you for the very warm welcome. And I'm so honored to be here. I'm just sharing my screen and we'll set my presentation up. And as Mumbi highlighted, I'm going to be talking about the impact of what we know works to prevent GBV and the importance of using research to inform policy and practice. We are all extremely aware of the size of the problem, with 1 in 3 women having reported experiencing physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. And as we spoke about at the beginning, 137 women across the globe are killed by a family member every day. And these rates have worsened during the pandemic. But the current investment in GBV prevention does not match the size of the problem, with even less investment being made on research into the issue. This is a real problem for us in the field of knowledge production, especially given the importance of research to inform policy and practice, and the importance of evidence-based and evidence-informed prevention programs to improve the lives of women and children. And as a field, we must begin to advocate for more and better resources for research on gender-based violence, particularly in the higher education sector. So that being said, I'm going to talk to 5 points that I think are important for us to consider as incubators of thought leadership for the GBV work and to develop advocacy tools for more and better research on GBV in this sector. I'm going to talk about the context and how important that is, about the importance of building on what we know works, the importance of building on and sharing a research agenda for the field to guide our work, the importance of sharing our research findings for those that can actually use it and make a difference. And I'm going to go back to what Lindy has talked about the importance of co-creation and collaboration. So what is the context within the work, within which we're working? Given the global figures, it's not a big jump to assume that the figures are the same at higher education institutions, or maybe even worse. Some statistics. In Egypt, 70% of women at universities reported experiencing sexual harassment. In South Africa, 62% reported experiencing sexual harassment. Whilst in Eswatini, more than 1 in 3 college attending women reported sexual assault in the past year, a rate 6 times higher than reported among women of the same age in the general population. Yet despite these figures, research also shows us that there's a very high level of underreporting of sexual assault on campuses, and it's guided by a lack of confidence in institutional response mechanisms, anxiety of how the institution or the police or others might deal with it because of the shame and stigma that's associated with sexual assault and sexual violence. And in many institutions, existing legislation and policies to address gender-based violence are reportedly discriminatory. There's an urgent need for clear policies and plans and interventions informed by evidence and research. Yet in an environment focused on knowledge generation that we're working in, There appears to be a real absence of research on GBV within the higher education institutions and what works to prevent it. We must commit to supporting and undertaking better research to develop and scale up evidence-informed programs to address GBV in higher education institutions. And as we've spoken about already, by doing so, we're not only providing students with a safe learning space and experience, but also building a group of future thinkers that embrace gender equality. Yet in building these programs, we must build on what we know works. And we do know a lot. We can prevent violence against women in a matter of years, not decades. For example, in the UK government, the UK government-funded program called What Works identified a number of effective programs for reducing violence. In the DRC, for example, a faith-based social norms intervention involving faith leaders and community action groups reduced violence from 69% to 29%. And a community-based social norms program called SASA in Uganda, where community activists address the imbalance of power between men and reduced violence in the intervention communities by 52%. We need to understand and build on what it is about these programs that make them effective. To effectively prevent GBV programs, we therefore must understand what drives this violence. We've spoken a little bit about this, but a study building on the work done through the What Works program shows us that men's use of violence against their partners is driven by poverty, patriarchal privilege, and the normative use of violence in interpersonal relationships. Factors that further increase the likelihood of men perpetrating violence against women also include childhood trauma, poor mental health and substance misuse, and poor communication and conflict in relationships. Disability status and context of armed conflict or post-conflict further reinforce and exacerbate these risks. The design of our programs is also essential to their success. Again, the What Works program identifies core elements of the design and implementation of programs that are essential to the success of a program. Programs must have a strong theory of change, building on the risks that I've just spoken about, work with both men and women, use participatory approaches, and address gender inequality. Services must be available to support survivors while these programs are being implemented, and user-friendly manuals, longer than shorter in duration, and staff being well trained are also essential elements. And programs must address multiple levels of risk across multiple levels of risk factors. Optimizing the design and implementation of our programs is vital to prevent violence against women, and these must be considered when we're thinking around developing and adapting programs preventing GBV on university campuses. The good news is we do, as a field, have a unifying framework developed by multiple agencies that draws on all the evidence that I've just spoken about. This framework contains a set of action-oriented steps that enables us to design, plan, implement, monitor, and evaluate interventions and programs using 7 strategies: relationship skills strengthened, empowerment of women, services ensured, reducing poverty, safe environments, and child and adolescent abuses prevented, and to transform norms, beliefs, and attitudes. We really encourage you to use this framework when thinking about GBV programming in your own institutions for guiding program evaluations. Another important point is that we need to be working towards developing a shared research agenda. So what are the priorities for GBV prevention in higher education institutions? Why is a research agenda important? Because it helps us identify evidence gaps and highlight priority areas for research, and can then therefore guide research expenditure and ensure that precious research resources are spent effectively, while also driving the field forward as a whole in a more systematic way. A shared agenda assists researchers, funders, practitioners, and policymakers with research planning, fundraising, and serves as a signal to the stakeholders on the areas of research that have been identified as being important. Yet, to be effective, we must avoid the agenda being developed by the loudest and the most senior in the room, which can lead to funding being misdirected or serving academic researchers' own agendas, rather than the communities for whom the research is meant to serve. Agenda setting efforts must use methods and approaches that bring in multiple and diverse voices to be meaningful and relevant to the communities we serve, and then to be taken up by researchers and academic institutions to guide our own work. And the SVAI just recently has been developing a process to develop a global shared research agenda And this work can help guide other regions. We are working to develop regional research agendas, and I would really like to work with all of you to think around how we might be able to do that for this sector. Really important when developing research is the importance of sharing our research. We do this work because we care, and because we care, we must ensure our research findings are useful and have the potential to improve and strengthen policy and practice. As such, we must consider all the activities throughout the research process that can contribute to the use of research evidence by policymakers, practitioners, and other development actors, and even within our own institutions. To do so, research uptake activities must be incorporated to every part of the research process, from inception and extending beyond to the completion of a study. And so it must be funded and integrated into the proposal. And we really must advocate for the inclusion of funding for research uptake in everything that we do. It is challenging to get research into policy. The findings of research uptake, however, are clear. To get research into policy, we need to focus on relationships, and we must work collaboratively. We can't stick narrowly to traditional academic dissemination platforms and systems. Our findings must be shared timelessly in user-friendly, accessible ways. So that brings me to my last point around co-creation and collaboration. GBV is complex. It's a wicked problem with multiple risk factors, multiple players involved, and no one organization or sector on their own can solve this problem. Academia is one important partner in finding a solution. It's not the only one. Collaboration between multiple sectors is necessary if we are to successfully reduce and prevent GBV. Working collaboratively promotes research uptake and the use by partners, especially, as I mentioned earlier, if you involve them from the beginning of a study, even when we're identifying the research topics and questions. Taking a collaborative learning approach enables partners to challenge and subvert traditional knowledge hierarchies and create opportunities to do things in new and different ways. It creates a culture of constant critical reflection and learning within and beyond the partnership, and builds a capacity and understanding of the issues of everybody involved in the partnership. It ensures that knowledge is co-created and co-owned with each partner, rather than being an extractive or an exploitative process. It builds better programs and responses. So in sum, to prevent GBV, which we can prevent GBV, we must understand that the context within which we are working is important. We must build on what we know works. We must be guided by existing international frameworks, ensure that our research is guided by an agenda and addresses key gaps in the field and has a policy or practice imperative. We must disseminate, and we must disseminate in creative ways and work collaboratively, bringing people from different backgrounds with different knowledge and experiences to think about and work together to develop effective and sustainable GBV prevention interventions. Thank you. Back to you, Mumbi.
Thank you very much indeed, Elizabeth, and thank you for emphasizing that need to connect research outcomes to policy ones. Next, I would like to then invite Professor Corney Davis, who is an associate professor at the Department of Strategic Communication at the University of Johannesburg. She's currently collaborating with the Shared Value Africa initiative in doing research on how to facilitate multi-sector collaboration in GBV prevention and intervention in the private sector in South Africa. Corney will give us an overview of the University of Johannesburg's approach to tackling GBV. Welcome, Prof. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's wonderful to see you all here. We are very excited about the work we've been doing with Shared Value Africa initiative and the research that we've embarked on. My slides are not changing. The command is not there, so I'll just speak. The purpose of my slide is actually so that we can share it with you, because I wanted you to see the projects that we are currently busy with, in the hope that we can encourage our other universities to do the same or similar studies. It's a very exciting project to embark with leaders in industry and the private sector, because that has been the gap in our gender-based violence research to date. As we know, most of our research has been published in health journals and in public health journals on national platforms. So it's come to light that there are things that the private sector just doesn't know. We are focusing on at the moment, showing them the importance of the ESG reporting, where gender equality fits in, and so far the reception has been warm. But there is a lot of things that we still need to do. And the purpose of my talk today is to speak to my fellow academics and to say, but we need to start enabling each other more. Gender-based violence has not been positioned in the field of strategic communication before. It's been positioned as violence in violence journals, in health journals, in safety promotion journals where I've published before. But we as academics need to bring this topic into our mainstream social journals. It needs to be written into corporate governance, into strategic planning, into even our organization public relations, into responsibility. It has to fit into our mainstream dialogue in the field of business and organizational communication. And that is where I raise a call to all of you, all of the academics, to say, but this is how we need to make a change. We need to get it written in to our literature so that we can approach it as a strategic issue. And this is the work I'm doing with Shared Value Africa Initiative. And I encourage all of you to collaborate with Tiki and Vuyo in this project so that we can get more research out. We are hoping to publish an extensive research report. We confirmed yesterday again that we are collaborating with KPMG to publish the new report on the impact of gender-based violence in South Africa. It's a project that we're very excited about. And what I want to say most is that let's look at the opportunities to enable each other. Let's reach out. Let's follow each other on our ResearchGate and our academia.edu platforms. Let's support the research. Let's make comments. Let's enable each other to do great work to make a difference in South Africa. We all know the statistics, but if South Africa is one of the worst in gender-based violence, I see the latest NSP report showed 5 times the world average. Let's change that. We are number 103 out of 149 countries on the World Happiness Index. Let's change that. Let's make it our business. We are so used to, and you know, as academics, we're looking at KPIs. What are our, which boxes do we need to tick? How many things do we need to do to meet the demands made of us? But what's in it really for us is the future of our country. It's the future of our children. And we can make a difference, and we are demonstrating that we can. I'm so encouraged by the presence here today, and I'm encouraged to see the partnerships that we can form and how we can work together. And I would have to say to you that I'm always here, always available. Please connect with me on all the social media platforms, and let's see what we can do together, because the message we need to share as academics here today is that we know we're not in the same boat. We're not all in the same boat. We are all in the same storm. And some of us are in rescue boats, and some of us are in yachts, and some of us are in canoes, and most are merely drowning. So let us as academics fill up our rescue boats and fulfill our duty that comes with knowledge. With absolute knowledge comes absolute responsibility. And let's take this seriously and take gender-based violence research to the next level so that we can find the solutions. And let us work with all stakeholders, including the private sector, who are definitive stakeholders, where we can reach people where they occupy most of their time and make the difference. Thank you for this opportunity and for being here. I now have the privilege to introduce Dr. Olebogeng Celebi. Since I have 1 minute, I better be quick. We've worked together before. She is senior lecturer at the Department of Business Management, University of Pretoria. Most importantly, she's associate coordinator of the South African Sustainable Development Goals Hub. She holds qualifications from some prestigious places such as University of Graz, Austria, University of Porto, Portugal, and University of Milan, Italy. So we look forward to hear what she has to share with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. Indeed, we are in the same boat, and we all need to take this issue of gender equality and gender-based violence very, very seriously. So the issue of gender equality and gender-based violence certainly is a complex one, because the perceptions that we have of the roles of different genders in society are definitely embedded in our cultures. It's embedded in our families. You know, you hear it in the way that people speak. For instance, I remember hearing as a young girl growing up that boys are better at maths than girls. So you can imagine the effect that that has on a young girl, the effect that it has on the decisions that she makes going forward, the effect that it has on her life in general, right? Even though the evidence shows that there's very, very little difference, if any at all, in terms of the average IQ of males and females, but we still have that deeply embedded in our culture and deeply embedded in the way that we live our lives. So this issue is deeply embedded in our society and will therefore require that different stakeholders come together to address this issue of gender inequality and the gender-based violence and femicide that we see resulting from it. And as you mentioned, Corné, I'm part of the SDG Hub at the University of Pretoria. I'm part of which is the Sustainable Development Goals Hub. And we know that SDG 17 is about partnering, right? About different partners coming together to solve different societal issues, including SDG 5, which is, gender equality. So universities certainly have a huge role to play in this process through our research and also our social influence. I think sometimes we don't take seriously how influential we are as universities and as academics. So at the University of Pretoria, we take this role very, very seriously. And I will touch on some of the things that we are doing at the university to address issues of gender equality and to address the issues of gender-based violence and femicide. So the first thing is that we have at the SDG Hub at the University of Pretoria, basically the SDG Hub is an online platform that aims to connect South African policymakers with the research and innovation that they need to implement all of the different SDGs. So given the breadth of the SDGs and the key role that policymakers have in creating an enabling environment for them to be reached, affording these policymakers access to up-to-date research that could influence policy is crucial. So we actually have a webinar that is planned for the 14th of October, and this webinar focuses on gender-based violence. And we have a great panel that we've put together. I can't really talk about the panel at this moment, but we have a panel of experts that will be led by Professor Rachel Jukes, who is a huge figure, when it comes to speaking on issues of gender-based violence and gender equality in South Africa and across the world. Also, we have the Advanced Human Rights course at the University of Pretoria that focuses on challenging gender inequality. And it's a collaboration that we have between the Sonke Gender Justice and the Center of Human Rights and the Center for Sexualities, AIDS and Gender, both of which come from the University of Pretoria. And this course actually explores the foundations of human rights based, of a human rights-based approach to challenging gender inequality. The Center for Human Rights is an academic department and a non-governmental organization that works towards human rights education in Africa. It also works towards a greater awareness of human rights and the wide dissemination of publications on human rights across Africa. And also several publications have come from this initiative and from this effort. We also have the Center for Sexualities, AIDS and Gender, which focuses on HIV and AIDS research, but also looks very, very closely at the dynamics of gender and the challenges that surround, issues of gender equality. In 2019, I had the great pleasure of being part of an initiative between the University of Pretoria and the Motsepe Foundation, where we had a robust debate that focused on how do we achieve gender equality and what are the processes that we have to go through in order to achieve gender equality. So that was a great pleasure to be part of that program. And also the University of Pretoria Tax Rez's Women in Leadership Academy, which was started in 2014, is basically a platform that we use to enrich the lives of young women at university. So we bring together the 18 residences that we have, and we pair them with a facilitator. A senior student leader also is involved in order to train and mentor and develop the capabilities of young women and to bring this whole issue of gender-based violence to the fore and to have these really, really important conversations. And part of us at the University of Pretoria having these very important conversations on gender-based violence and gender equality is the Speak Out UP campaign, which focuses on raising awareness on GBV and femicide. So just to end off, we're doing a lot at the University of Pretoria, but just to end off, I would like to quote the words of our Vice Chancellor and Principal at the University of Pretoria, who is Professor Tawana Kupe. And he says that as a nation, we need to take stock of a variety of factors, including the very high levels of violence against women in our society. Women and girls not only live in fear of violence, but society has also normalized this violence. Economic and cultural disparities continue to limit the life, health, and choices of women, and we owe it to Lillian Ngoyi and her comrades to ensure that all the hurdles are removed so that women can take their rightful place in our democracy and on our continent. As the university community, we owe it to ourselves and our communities to promote and champion causes like we do with the Speak Out UP campaign against gender-based violence. And we have to speak out and ensure that our commitment against anti-sexism and dealing with the scourge of gender-based violence is seen, and that we continue to live out what we call at the University of Pretoria the UP way. So collectively, we can make a change, and collectively, we can each help to create a gender equal world. As human beings and as women in general, as women, we have a very, very important and critical role to play in the world's development. So I would like to then, as I've ended off my talk there, I'd like to introduce Ms. Immaculate Mogotsi, who is a senior research fellow in multidisciplinary research at the University of Namibia, and she's also heading the gender training and research program there. She has a keen interest in research that focuses on gender-based violence and the empowerment of women, and also the sexual and reproductive health and rights of women. So over to you, Immaculate. We look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Thank you so much, Willie, for the thorough introduction. And thank you also to the organizer for the invitation to be part of this forum. And allow me to greet you all from the mighty Namibia. I'm based in Windhoek at the University of Namibia. I would like to take us today through three issues that I would like to bring forth. One is the role of academia as allies in ensuring that gender equality and gender-based violence is really addressed in academic spaces. And I also like to briefly touch on how can we in academia spearhead gender equality, not just within the university spaces, but also in the various roles that we play as community activists, as board members outside the university, in the civil society organizations where we serve. What can we do? And I'll briefly touch on what UNAM is doing in that aspect. And then obviously I would like to leave us with the hope that we should really collaborate, and how can we go about that collaboration. Now, I really want to start by just reminding us that the call for gender equality and the call to eradicate gender-based violence, femicide in our community is embedded in the instruments that our countries have already adopted. as Southern Africans, as African countries, we have signed up, our countries have signed up to the Beijing Declaration. We have signed up to the CEDAW Declaration. We have signed up to the SDGs. So some of these requests that are put forward are really not just because there's a demand that is being made, but our presidents have actually, and our nation states have actually made the commitment to ensure that GBV and SGBV will be addressed. Even at the African national level, we have got the African Charter for People's Rights, and we also have got the Africa Agenda for 2063. All these documents are very specific in terms of our role in addressing gender-based violence. And also at the regional level, if you look at the role that we need to play as SADC member states in making sure that gender equality is a priority that needs to be taken care of. We've got the Maputo Protocol on Women's Rights, and we also have the SADC gender protocols. Now, I'm deliberately starting at this level to really make us understand that as academics, we have to cascade these commitments into reality in the work we do in our various universities. And we have to make sure that through the curriculums that we are setting up, through the extracurricular activities that we run in our universities, we play a key role in making sure that gender-based violence becomes a key issue in the work that we are doing. Unfortunately, when it comes to gender mainstream, this must become a cross-cutting issue in our work. We can't leave it to civil society organization, neither can we leave it to government alone. And I can understand sometimes that as academia, we feel that we have to chase academic papers, we have to chase journal articles, we've got too much teachings. But we should find an intelligent way to integrate these commitments into the work that we are doing in academia. I would like to briefly touch on the importance of institutional policies to make sure that the national commitment and the international commitments that are made must become part of our national commitment, and particularly our university commitments. One is really just to make sure that when we appoint people into positions of responsibilities in universities, we should make sure that gender representation is adhered to. And just as a point, we have just as the University of Namibia embarked on a very extensive restructuring process. So far, if one looks at the restructuring process, there is really a component of gender representation from the top management up to the middle management. It will actually be very interesting to see that once we are done and we have completed the entire restructuring process, to go back again and just assess to what extent did we make sure that as we are restructuring and we are appointing individuals in positions, that the component of gender representation is attended to. Gender equality, my colleagues, can only be fully attained if men and women are fully represented in all structures of the university. And unfortunately, that should be done from the toppest, highest ranks to the lowest ranks. So, and I think we should also make sure that within our various universities where we are, that we should really start checking. We should really start policing and checking how is the leadership structure? How is the middle management to the lowest ranks? Are we making sure the gender is represented? And if there are loopholes, what are they? And we should find ways then to address those loopholes. Another issue that I thought I need to really touch has to do with curriculum development and our role in terms of gender equality and infusing and addressing issues of sexual violence and gender-based violence within the curriculums that we are developing. The good thing so far is that UNAM has a module that we are calling social contemporary issues. This is a cross-cutting module. All the first years that are registering at UNAM, we make sure that they are taking this particular module, and it is touching on issues of SGBV. We should also, as academia, make sure that we conduct extracurricular activities that are in line with making sure that we infuse the issues of activism, feminism within our students, because by doing so, they will then also get to understand the roles that they need to play to become active actors in addressing women's issues, in voicing, making their voices heard. Sometimes our workload might not allow it, and what we are doing at the University of Namibia is to really make sure that we work with civil society organizations. Where we are running short, they can then take our students in making sure that they have an understanding of what feminist activism is all about, and that we make sure that they also are infused into the discipline of feminism. Mumbi, I still have time, not so?
No, we're actually over time, so maybe just
Yes.
the last sentence.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, really, I would like to leave us as fellow panelists and for the participants that have joined us with the plea that more than ever before, as African universities, we should find avenues to collaborate. And the multidisciplinary research at the University of Namibia, and particularly the unit where I'm based, we are willing to really collaborate in terms of research, in terms of particularly gendered research, in terms of consultancy, in terms of teaching. And I hope that as we are taking this forum and the discussions further, we would be able to leave this platform and then engage further in ways how we can then collaborate. I want to thank you all for your time and for listening, and I really look forward to an engaged platform after this conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Immaculate. I would then introduce, I think, then the next presenter, who is Dr. Hengiwe Ndlovu, postdoctoral researcher at the Center for Women and Gender Studies at the Nelson Mandela University, who will actively be telling us about Nelson Mandela University's approach . Oh, sorry, am I muted? Apologies. So as I was saying, I would probably invite our next speaker, Dr. Hengiwe. Are you there? Can you hear us? Just give us a second. Apologies for that as we try to sort out the issue. Dr. Hengiwe, are you?
I'm there.
Okay, great. Welcome and please go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, you can.
Me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mumbi, for a warm introduction. Okay, so I understand I have 6 minutes to talk about the work that we are doing at Nelson Mandela University and advancing the fight for gender-based violence and gender harm across the province, but also within the university, and in collaborative work within the African continent and beyond our borders. So in terms of what we've been doing at the Center for Women and Gender Studies at Nelson Mandela University is to undo the long histories of silencing, the long histories of erasure, and the long histories of
apologies. I think we are having some challenges. Perhaps what I can request is, as she's trying to connect, we could go to Nonkosi. Nonkosi, are you there? Yes, I would just welcome you. So as we wait for Dr. Hengiwe to come back, Ms. Nokosi is the Director for the Center for Diversity, Inclusivity and Social Change at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, and she will be sharing with us her approach, or rather the university's approach in fighting against gender-based violence. Very welcome, Ms. Nokosi. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you also to the shared initiative for providing universities with a platform to share our own stories, to share our research agendas, and as well as practices and lessons. And I'm here today to share with you our story at CPUT. GBV is one of the strategic focus of our plan. It is the critical cross-cutting pillar of gender transformation agenda of our CPUT's One Smart Vision 2030 strategy. It is also anchored in our oneness of ensuring that we embrace diversity, inclusivity, and social change within human centricity. Again, it is anchored in our smartness in terms of digital transformation in order to enhance and ensure a gender or GBV responsive social impact in our local, national, regional, and global context in terms of Western Cape Vision 2040, NTP Agenda 2063, and SDGs our Agenda 2030. The next slide is about our integrated institutional response to GBV across the university for staff and students. One of the key issues is that we, in terms of the SGBV policy, we also have, sorry, the slide before this, the next slide, before this one. The next one. Okay, move. Sorry, oh, my minutes are moving. Okay, the slide 2 is, okay, move to the next one. It's about integrated institutional response to GBV. That's the slide 2, which includes our accountability in terms of leadership and management. The next one, leadership and management, I don't know what. Leadership and management, where we have, sorry, it's the next one.
Nonkosi,
Yeah.
apologies, Nonkosi. So
Okay.
the next slide is your final slide. This
Okay.
Your
Okay.
final.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. So it includes our accountability, where we have a GBV institutional committee, which is chaired by the Vice Chancellor and report to the council. We also create an enabling environment through sexual and GBV policy that is now being finalized. And of course, we have a GBV training rollout plan where it's based on training the trainer and also ensuring that, you know, we do a training for staff and students, and it is integrated in our multi-phased response to GBV as well as support. And again, we have an interdisciplinary and cross-functional reporting and coordination mechanism to ensure that, you know, our GBV strategy is integrated across the university. In terms of inclusive multi-sectoral partnership, of course, we are, this slide talks about the issues of, we have partnership and engagement with quite a number of stakeholders in the Western Cape. Safe to say, NPA, for instance, as the government, Western Cape NPA, which is assisting us in the rollout of GBV pillar, in other words, of training and capacity building. Remember, we have localized the 6 pillars of GBV in order to ensure that it talks to our business. And also the NPA is assisting us also in the creation of, or in the finalization of, our sexual and gender-based violence policy. And we quite have a number of stakeholders, even the UN Women and CGE, Western Cape. We also have all the civil society, I can mention a number of them, SSA,
that are also assisting us in the intervention programs, because the key issue is that we are a university, but the university community is composed of students and staff who are community members. They bring in their community as well as their societal issues to the university. So we are at the coalface of receiving all those kind of issues. We also have critical partnership and involvement of men and boys, and also men in particular. We, through our program for engaging young men called Amajita program, which is aimed at attracting young men students in issues of GBV and gender equality and women empowerment. The he for she that was also established. In fact, it was launched in 2018 when the VC also signed the pledge, and we are now doing a critical research on that. Another key issue is to ensure that we also integrate inclusivity through surveys that we have done in order to ensure, because if you look at the socio-ecological model of our staff and students, they bring in influences from all the, as individual, as peers, as from the society, from everywhere. So we are doing a survey to ensure that every year we check, our disaggregated data, and this aggregated data will also assist us to influence our policies in order to ensure that they are responsive, as well as reasonable accommodation for all our staff and students, because we are quite integrated. Chair, also as part of our partnership and this inclusive partnership within this short space of time, on the 24th, we are also having our webinar. It's a partnership webinar with UN Women and HES-SA, where we are collaborating on GBV research, as well as research and gender equality and women empowerment. We will be launching this partnership with them, and also refocusing on he for she, that is men's championship across the university. So we will invite other GBV interventions. So on the 24th of August at 11:30, we will unpacking exactly what the CPUT is.
Sorry, Nonkosi.
Yes, I am done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. As you can see, we are also passionate about this, and I know we can talk so much about it, but the challenge is always the time. I would then thank you very much, Nonkosi, for that and sharing so deeply. I think I will now call on Dr. Hengiwe once again, if she is able to come on. Perhaps I would suggest that, Hengiwe, you could keep your video off and just have the audio. Probably that may help with the internet.
Thank you, Mumbi. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay. I will keep the video off. It's heavily raining where I'm at, so the network is very unstable. So I will try to do as much as I can before I get kicked out again. In terms of the work that we're doing at the Center for Women and Gender Studies and at Nelson Mandela University, because as the center, we've positioned ourselves in ways that, but also within the Eastern Cape province, doing some collaborative work with other universities across the country and across Africa, and with some of the international collaborations in terms of advancing the gender transformation. And in this gender transformation thing, we seek to mainstream gender in teaching, in research, in community engagement, and in all the advocacy work that we are doing, because we saw it necessary to contribute towards the deeper transformative agenda that centers the dignity of women and sexual minorities. And this comes with a realization of the decades of erasure of women's histories within the scholarship, but also the erasure of their intellectual biographies, of which we think and we believe is very key in terms of when you begin to talk about gender-based violence and gender-based harm. You need to locate these histories, and then you need to trace them, the voices of the women, the work that they've done so far up to date. And because in most cases, this work is erased in academic work and the voices of these women are silenced, so we can't hear what has been happening, and therefore it then leads to different forms of violence, because as my colleagues have said, who came before me, that gender-based violence and gender harm is located within the different university structures. And we've seen this through bullying, harassment, and everything that happens to women in leadership in general, but also on the day-to-day lived experiences of students on campus and around our communities. So it is important that we embark on that work. So as a center, also working with other different structures, we seek to advance and remember the African intellectual histories that challenge and shift the geographies of reason towards the global south, because we believe that as much as we can learn a lot from the global north, we also have a duty to understand ourselves and also our local context in terms of when we're fighting gender-based violence and other related issues, how are we positioned? What are the intersectionalities of our different challenges that we face on an everyday? So we work with the university and different committees within the university to advance this work. And one of the most amazing work that's been done by the Transformation Office is that the Transformation Office is running some advocacy work that seeks to create awareness, to educate and equip students and communities around us with the necessary skills of fighting gender-based awareness and other forms of harm. So among other programs that the Transformation Office is running, we have a program that's called Amanda Memeza campaign. And in this campaign, it's based on a fictional story of a first-year student. And here, it's a shared support group where people come together to share different stories as experiences of gender-based violence and other forms of gender harm that are experienced by students and other women on an everyday basis. And the other campaign is called Singamadoda, which seeks to promote positive masculinity within the university, but also around the communities. So Singamadoda is a campaign that actually targets men who are interested in working on issues of masculinity and all of that, but which is a positive masculinity, because we can't have a conversation around gender-based violence and gender harm without including men, and this becomes key. And then the other campaign is the Mandela Pride campaign, of which the Transformation Office has seen that because everyone else targets the Pride Month, and it is to say, we shouldn't leave the struggles for the queer community to just one month. It's something that should happen over and over consistently throughout the year. So through these programs, they run support groups, they run Facebook pages where experiences can be shared. They also equip students with tools like the online reporting mechanisms where students and staff are being workshopped in terms of how to report cases of gender-based violence and all of other related cases. So we'll be happy to share some of these initiatives with people who want to collaborate. Thank you.
you. Thank you very much, Dr. Hengiwe. I would now like us to go now to the second part of the program, which is a panel discussion, and I will welcome all our speakers today to just switch on their videos so we can be seen, and then we can kick off the discussion. We have a short time to really make the commitments we need to do, but I'm sure we will do it. So probably the first question I can pose, and probably I would put this one to Elizabeth first, and we can all chip in, is what can we do as a collective to influence change? And what actions can we commit to? Probably that's where we can begin. Please, you may go ahead, Elizabeth, and then we can go round.
From thank you, Mumbi, for that great question. From a researcher perspective, I think it's really important to begin to identify what's being done and to learn from that. So what do we know is being done? What are the discriminatory practices that have been raised up on the chat that exist, and how can we work to change them to ensure that survivors, when they do report sexual assault, are supported? So I do think a real sort of view of developing an understanding of what is going on within and across universities, because it's been so wonderful to hear all these incredible inputs of all the great work that's being done regionally, and we can learn from each other. Developing a community of practice. Sorry, my audio device seems to be not working. Can you still hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
So developing a community of practice is really important, as well as developing a shared research agenda, which I spoke about, to identify what are the gaps in our knowledge and what resources can we bring to bear to address those gaps are very important. And I really want to support everybody's commitment to doing this using a feminist approach, and then working together to share resources and share skills and bringing in diverse and new voices to the conversation. I think those are the important actions from my side.
Thank you. Professor Corne, on your side and reflecting on your experiences in terms of research, how do we come together as a collective?
I think the most important is to share our research, as Elizabeth is saying, share what we're doing with each other, find platforms to engage. I suggested that you join the It's Not Okay page on Facebook, for example, which is an informal engagement, but we can stay in touch with each other. There are many of us here today, and we won't keep track of what we are all doing if we don't engage with each other. I'm in pillar 6 of the strategic plan. We are developing databases to share research on a platform that's accessible to everybody. I also suggest when our PowerPoint presentations are shared following this event, UJ, I have collaborated with Transformation Unit. We've put together a very comprehensive brochure for our students. Our deans have ensured us it will be made available to all students on all platforms, in all curriculum and all faculties, that the support information is available. You'll see on our brochures, we've identified vulnerabilities of students, support systems, outreach numbers. I suggest that all universities do the same. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, put your logo on it, add to what's problematic in your area. Let's just let things happen. Let's roll it out. Let's not wait for policies and procedures, and let's just do things together, because we can. And we are passionate enough to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. I'll move now to Immaculate, because you did speak about the curriculum, you did speak about policies. Maybe you could just tell us, what your experience has been with actually implementing, this in curricula and in policy in the university, and maybe highlight some of the challenges you experienced with that process.
I think from the university management, there has been a lot of support and commitment to ensure that we infuse gender into our curriculum. So at that level, there were not so much of a challenge. As a module, and also if one looks at the various faculties, maybe faculty of law, you look at geography, where gender and climate change will be taught, you look at sociology, you look at education, and also the master's program. So in terms of setting up a curriculum, and mainstreaming gender, that has not been really such a headache. I think the headache for us is what happens in practice. What happens when our students are experiencing gender-based violence? What type of mechanisms are in place where the students knows exactly where should we go report? And not just students, even including staff members who experience this. How safe is it to go and report a particular case? Those people that you are reporting to, are they sufficiently trained to deal with these particular issues so that the survivors can feel confident enough in the structures? And I think as universities, these are the areas that we need to strengthen, because as long as we continue speaking and we continue doing research, but we don't put practical mechanisms in place so that those who find themselves in these situations know where to report, they know it is safe, they know that the matters will be dealt with in a time that is speedily enough. And I think for us at the University of Namibia, that is an area that I think we still need to strengthen out a little. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Lindy, I'll come to you now because, you have, given us a challenge. I think perhaps the first question I could ask is, what are some of the ways you think academia can engage with the work of civil society and NGOs? How do we come together? Where do we begin?
Thank you for that, Mumbi. I do think, we must have discussions that are multi-sectorial. Our conversations must go beyond the confines of our spaces. And while it is great for us to have a conversation, perhaps as academics, at some point we have to open up the space and have a broader engagement and conversation with NGOs, community-based organizations, and civil society, leveraging the benefit of the knowledge and information that civil society participants, activists, and so forth gain on the ground, fighting the scourge, as well as what academia has to offer by way of research, information, evidence-based strategies that help drive behavioral change. There's a lot of policies that are coming out of research and work that is being done, for instance, that affects gender equality and gender parity. There's research that tells us that given the current trajectory, it is going to take women another 100 years to be paid the same way as women if we continue on the current path. So that information is there for all of us. And I think we need to renegotiate the boundaries of what we do in our spaces and not be perhaps as boxed as we were. Get out of the echo chambers that are more comfortable and so forth, and get into each other's spaces with a view to mobilizing each other's energy, each other's platforms, each other's access, and the areas that we can impact as a collective. Thanks, Mumbi.
Thank you very much, Lindy. Perhaps building up on that collaboration, Nonkosi, in your presentation, you talked about several, I think, partnerships and collaborations from your space. Perhaps you can tell us about some best practices as academic institutions, how we can secure these kind of partnerships and make them impactful.
Thank you so much. In addition to my colleagues, I also want to mention the issue of CPUT 101, which is a compulsory module for first-year students as they enter the university, because GBV is very critical for that. And also in terms of partnership, we need an integrated partnership with a structured approach, because we need to know what partner A is assisting us with and all those issues, and A, B, C, and D, so that we have evidence-based reporting, evidence-based outcome of what we are trying to do, because it is not a matter of collaborating for the sake of collaborating. We must have the outputs and how this thing, GBV, contributes to the attributes, student attributes, in order to ensure that our students, as they beyond university, they are able to face the world and also be responsible citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Some very good questions coming into the chat. There is one here which I think, Oleboheng, I would invite you to just give your insights on. How do we ensure that all great initiatives continue into the future? So often work depends on those with passion who initiate them, but then initiatives fade as time goes on. How do we sustain this? And I think you also have the perspective of the broader United Nations. We're trying to make sure that we, continue with that work even beyond us. So how do we sustain this passion that we have and this work we need to do?
Thank you, Mumbi. I think one of the major issues is that passion generally only comes from people seeing themselves in a particular issue. So it's difficult for a person to be passionate about something that they don't feel connected to. And that's very often the issue when it comes to, issues of gender equality. If you don't think that you are affected by it, then it's very difficult for you to be passionate about it, right? As you can see, even today, this is a panel full of women, right? Because we all feel that we are affected by it and therefore we are passionate about it. So I think we need to show people, whether male or female, that we are all affected in some way by issues of gender inequality. We're all affected in some way by issues of femicide, issues of gender-based violence. People have to be aware of the effect that these issues have on them as individuals. And even when we think of, we talk about collaboration and, bringing different stakeholders together to have an impact on, changing the way that people perceive gender and issues of GBV and femicide. In order to bring people together, you have to show them that this particular issue is important to you. This is how it affects you. This is how it affects you as an organization. This is how it affects you as an individual. This is how it affects you as a business, right? And because I come from the Faculty of Economic and Management Science, and we all know that the most important thing to most businesses is money, right? So as much as we can talk about gender-based violence and the effect that it has on women, and the organizations have to understand the effect that it has on them, the effect that it has on their pockets, the effect that it has on the economy at large, the effect that it has on society. If we're not able to show them the effect that it has on them, then it won't have the longevity, or the solutions that we come up with won't have the longevity that we want them to have. So it's very important that we focus on that first.
Thank you very much, Oleboheng. Hengiwe, if you can hear us, I hope. Perhaps can you give us a bit of insight as to how collaboration could work with the private sector from where you sit, and whether you had experiences with bringing together your work in the university and the private sector around gender inclusion and GBVF?
Thank you, Mumbi. So from my perspective, it begins with the work of exposing issues of gender-based violence and gender harm within these spaces. And what does it mean? It begins with opening up a space within communities for people working in these corporate spaces to talk about their experience, to share ways in which they could be addressed. But also then once this conversation has started, it's then easier to come up with initiatives in terms of influencing different policies within different sectors of the economy, because also the economy is key when we're talking about gender issues in general and gender inequality in particular. So the private sector remains the most important space when we're talking about women empowerment, but also about women in leadership. So the collaboration has to begin with the conversations at a community level, because as much as we're part of the academic spaces and the part of the corporate world, we also are part of the broader communities in which we live in. So once a conversation begins there, then it's much easier to take the conversation back to these spaces and then to call upon different ways of collaborating and influencing policies within those different spaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll pose one question, which before I come back to the research, because I still think we need to untangle that a bit more. But the issue of bringing in men to the conversation, and it's just following up on what Lindy also said earlier. How do we do this very practically? What are some of the things we can do? Because we do know theoretically that they are essential in this, but we also need to get them, if they are not already, just as fired up as we are. And I think we do need some concrete steps there. I don't know what we think about that, and here anybody can come in really with ideas on that.
If I may.
Immaculate.
If I may. In our, we are running an extracurricular activity called UNAM Action Research Team. This is an initiative in 8 Southern African universities where academia is mentoring young professionals, like young students. And initially the idea was to purely focus on females until we realized, it won't work. We should also get our boys and males involved. We should also get male academics involved in mentoring the students, the male students. We should also get male academics involved in mentoring the sexual minorities. And really some of the activities, and I should say it upfront, it's a struggle to get men excited about SGBB conversations. They don't easily buy into it. But what we would do is we would host on a Saturday a soccer game. And after the game, there would be some refreshments and a quick conversations about unwanted pregnancy. After a month, there's going to be a volleyball game, men are there, and a quick conversations about drugs and rape and, and all that. So would center our activities around male programs, the things that they're excited about. And they will have them for an hour and have very informally while we are all sweaty and have a conversations. Once they buy into that, you will then be able to get them into the workshop. You should literally get them first on the field and then later on bring them into the workshop for now in-depth conversations, reflections, and so. That seems to have worked for us.
If I can also chip in, men sometimes don't underestimate the fact that they don't know, they do. The Amajita campaign was started by students, male students. They ensured that they have all the structures, the clubs of Amajita in all campuses. And when we introduced the he for she, where we wanted to involve also even men as staff, Amajita is up and running and they are running it, and they also have their own indabas and also have a joint with the women's structures. You would be surprised how men are leading the campaigns and also ensuring they also involved the issues of men's health and other issues, and which also has extended to issues of sexual and reproductive rights, which sometimes in some webinars they discuss as both men and women, sometimes as men standing in, as men working together with women. And it's quite, it happens in if you let them run, don't tell them, even men as deans. We have our vice chancellor has signed the pledge. They have a pledge, CPUT men pledge that they have signed, and you will be surprised how many men have signed on that, because they have very good stories to tell. And also are affected by GBV and AIDS. So let's take them, students and staff, they really are not just waiting for us. They are activists themselves in our campus. You just need to activate that activism in order to ensure that it is mainstreamed across even the curricula, even CPUT 101. Our mentors are both males and females. So it's a matter of ensuring that generation equality is in practice, although it has not, but you could see that there's generation equality. taking place. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I
Thank
jump
you.
in, Mumbi, if I may?
Yes, please.
Quickly. So I think one of the things that we need to realize as we claim doing the work of feminism is the realization that as much as it is important work, it is also difficult work, and realizing that it is a struggle that is going to take time, but also with a commitment to the struggle in itself. And we know that the question of gender equality and gender-based violence is a question of power and structural power, to be specific. So in terms of how do we engage men and how do we bring them on board, it's not going to be an easy conversation, because it's easier to commit to these programs. It's easier to sign up and do everything, but the actual commitment to doing the work is the one that is still lacking, and we're still seeing it even within the leadership spaces, the continuous holding onto power. But I think some of the work that we're doing at Nelson Mandela Singamadoda is one of the work that's to create awareness, where you slowly engage. Because even if we engage in these campaigns, we're matching with men and we're saying all men are trash, they don't even understand that what that hashtag means. You need to unpack it to them. You need to point out to the structural dynamics that the hashtag is seeking to address, so that then they take it from there to understand, and then they come on board. So we must understand that it's a lot of work, as draining and exhausting as it is, it has to be done. Thank you.
Thank
Mundi, if you can take one
Yes.
more.
Yes, please.
Briefly, I think one should also consider the work of men themselves, the issues facing men themselves. I have a son, he's 17 years old now, the second born, and he's in the last but 1 year before matric. And just before he was going to start high school, my husband and the father of all the friends in his circle, given that these children have sleepovers and all of those things, decided to form what they call Dads and Lads. And Dads and Lads is really a monthly meeting. They go play basketball, and then they have a whole afternoon. They pre-plan, come up with a topic, and they talk about issues affecting men. And a lot of things have come out of there, such as how to deal with toxic masculinity in this age, era, and time. And I just give this as an example to say, I think in drawing men into our conversation, our struggle, we need to appreciate the struggle of men as well. The threats that come with a sudden, I say, over-representation of female, the rise of female leadership. What does it mean? Do I no longer have space, and so forth? We also need to acknowledge that in South Africa in particular, we walk with generations of men who have not had positive role models. They are the walking wounded. And because they are walking wounded, the abused abuse. So there are those kind of issues that affect men that lead to problems for women, that we also need to take responsibility for being part of co-creating solutions and coming together. I think you can only co-opt somebody into your own agenda if you're interested in their agenda. I think Uleboheng put it well when she said, you are not going to be invested and passionate about something unless it means something to you and it affects you. So in talking about these things, we need to frame them in the context of a future that we all want for ourselves, we all want for our children, and indeed in the context of the kind of South Africa that is pregnant with expectation and future and possibility that we can only unleash if we deal with these problems in our societies and workplaces and workspaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Lindy. I'd now like to, because we still have to keep shifting to that point of, okay, what do we then do? What are the next steps? I'd like to come back to the research, and I think probably Elizabeth and Prof will help here based. What have your experiences been, especially from you, Elizabeth, first, with research that informs policy? Because I feel, and I could be wrong, but I feel that there are two main streams of research. There's the mainstream and then there's the feminist literature. And a lot of the traditional development outcomes around education, enrollment and so on of girls are largely, quantitatively based mainstream. And now when you start talking about, hey, I'm going to give a feminist perspective, you know, talk about people's experience, give their stories, there may be some, first of all, maybe lack of experience with that, or even with people taking it seriously. So I don't know what you think would be the best approach when we're trying to make that research impactful from a policy perspective. How do we go about this as academics?
I think I want to go back to the original starting point of this whole panel and discussion is the importance of relationships and collaboration. If we really want to make a difference with our research and using feminist approaches doesn't mean poor quality or not rigorous research. It's just as rigorous and just as useful and probably even better because it actually looks at our own biases, what we bring into the research. And it is around addressing data inequity as well. So it also can be both quantitative and qualitative. It's just how you look at the data using a gendered lens and understanding equity. So it's very important. And I think it's more rigorous than a sort of purely academic, historically colonial approach to data use and analysis. So for me, getting research into policy historically and now is about relationships, working with the folk that we really want to influence with our research. It's never always a straight line. It can sometimes be a straight line, but it requires some trust and time that people will really do trust that your research is rigorous, is useful, is going to inform their policies and practice. Then ensuring that the research findings are presented in a way that can be used by practitioners and policymakers is really important. And ensuring that the research questions that we are actually investing huge amounts of really small, these are really precious resources into research, are actually research questions that our policymakers, our communities that we work with, our leaders, the people that can use this information for really impactful change, are the questions that they need answered. So that cannot be done in a silo. We have to be working with each other. We have to be reaching out to each other. And we have to be asking each other, what can we bring to the table to begin answering the big questions that we need answered? And using a feminist approach only makes that process much more rigorous and much more meaningful. So I'm going to hand over to Corné because I think that you had identified Corné as a...
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. At the moment, we are doing the research in the private sector, and it's so important what Liz is saying. It is all about relationships. I am relying on my network of academics, such as Liz, such as Tiki, to open doors, to get CEOs to engage with me. And some responses are very warm and some responses are cold. And we're having the conversation though. We're not going to go away. The problem is not going to go away. We've got the National Strategic Plan calling on the private sector to participate. We've got the ESG criteria against which they are measured for what they are doing. So the conversation are being had, and we are building those relationships. I think it's important to show the private sector when we engage. We are not there to hold them accountable and test what they are doing. We are having a friendly conversation. We are not coming with a hashtag men not trash approach. We are coming with an approach to say we're in this together. How can we help you? We are not saying that it's just a take, it's a give and take. So when we are engaging with the private sector, my offer is always to present a talk to their staff as a gesture of goodwill, to educate. I'm not coming there to ask for money. I'm simply asking, how can we do this together? And those who are leaders are welcoming me and are talking to me. And that already speaks for itself. I'm actually going to share on LinkedIn a response. I'm not going to mention the name. I had to fall off my chair because the person was saying that to be able to participate in this conversation about what the private sector should do, first they want to see how is it going to benefit the company? How is the company going to get exposure from having a conversation? And if there's no benefit to the company, they're not prepared to talk about how they are going to participate in gender. So I'm going to use it as a case study. It's a beaut It's an absolute beauty. I'm going to do a write-up about it. It's fantastic. I'm so glad they responded that way, because we can use that to show how not to respond in the private sector. But our research is going ahead. Nothing is stopping us. We are all in it together. Liz is helping me. Tiki is helping me. My network is helping me. It's happening. So we're very excited about the research in the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Oh, yes, please. No,
just one. And I'm saying thank you to Kone and Tinky. That's 100%. I agree with them. But I also want to add the fact that, you know, even in higher education, you will get issues of saying, you know, this integration and relationship should be very strong, because it needs to be also our research to be informed by also our evidence-based reporting, because we need to understand what are the trends or patterns, so that really our research is focused and can assist our own institutions. It is not only sets for marks, it is between staff and students, student and staff and outsiders, and student and outsiders. What are the trends and what are the patterns, so that we can find solutions for our universities? Because this is exactly what Conde was saying about the issue of saying, what is it going to assist us to know the trends and patterns, so that we are able to have an evidence-based approach that will be able to assist our universities to drive the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I now start, because we're approaching, you know, the finish line where we really have to say what we're going to do, the first 1 or 2 steps. But there's very interesting information in the chat. And I've seen a comment here from Musisiwe, who says, you know, my experience is that women in powerful status positions unconsciously and at times consciously protect spaces where GBV is enacted, you know. And she goes on to reflect, you know, can we provide some insights on what we think around that, and then how do we go around it within our own institutions? I think that's an excellent observation, and anybody here can jump in. Oloboheng, I see you nodding, so maybe you first, then Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mumbi. I think, you know, one of the major issues is that gender equality or issues of gender inequality are embedded in our culture. I think we grow up with this. So that's why it's important, you know, I even wrote a little statement here because I see in the chat there's a lot of conversation around the role of boys. I see even my colleague, Dr. Nay Leonard, is here talking about, you know, the fact that boys become men, right? Little girls become women. And the reality is, you know, we develop these perspectives from the time that we are children. As I mentioned earlier in my talk, I would hear all the time that girls are not as good at maths as boys are. You know, the role of a girl or the role of a woman is in the kitchen, right? So the reality is we grow up with this and we bring it into the workplace. So it's not that, you know, these issues of gender equality, they don't just appear once we enter the workplace. They start from the time we're 5 years old, like 2 years old, from what we observe in our environment. And that's why this conversation, it has to happen at a much larger scale. Even, for instance, you know, it says my internet connection. I remember, for instance, when I was a child, you know, and it's a silly little example of, you know, I still to this day, I don't litter. I never litter. And that's because from the time I was little, I remember at 6 years old, I'd be sitting in my class in grade 1, and they would constantly talk to us about you should never be a litter bug. And these are the reasons you shouldn't be a litter bug, right? And that's something that I've carried now into my you know, I'm 30 now, so into my 30s, okay? It was ingrained in me from that young age. So I think that conversation has to be carried, you know, to, you know, the youth and the future youth and future CEOs of tomorrow who are still in grade 1 right now. We have to ingrain in them that, you know, that you know, there's no difference, or that we shouldn't, you know, discriminate against someone just because they're female or male, right? So to me, that's why I do believe 100% that as women, we have also contributed, but we've contributed because it's normal in our society that, you know, there's, you know, male and female people should be discriminated against because of their gender.
Thank you very much, Uleboheng. Let me invite Elizabeth, because she had raised her hand, and then maybe Hengiwe as well.
I think Uleboheng has just been very perfect, given the perfect response, because I just wanted to say that we are all born into the patriarchy. And so the patriarchy is within us. We have to also constantly be aware of our own biases, who we are and how we're interacting in the world, and how our upbringing has influenced who we are and how we either treat other women or how we deal and respond to men. So it is within us as well to be able to go through our own programs. GBV prevention is personal transformation. It's not a simple program. It takes time. It's challenging our beliefs, our understandings of who we are. And who we are is from birth and childhood and adolescence and into adulthood. So GB prevention has to start across from the very beginning, across the lifespan. We also need parenting interventions that address gender as well. And at the moment, many of our parenting interventions that we have are completely absent of the issue of gender. And I think we really need to start thinking around how do we bring the issue and discussion around the patriarchy and gender into all of what we do from very early on throughout the lifespan. We have to be doing many things at small doses over a long period of time and consistently to prevent gender-based violence in our societies. We can do it. It's absolutely preventable. And I agree with Prof. Davis. We have to take action. We've got a lot of evidence of what works, but we have to keep doing it. It's a sustained, ongoing process, which we can do, and we must do it. Thanks, Mumbi.
Thank you. Hengiwe, it's seen your hand up, and then we could have Lindy.
Thanks, Mumbi. Very quickly. So the question is about women in powerful position being bullied. And for me, I follow my colleagues in terms of the structural socialization, the effects of the structural socialization within our own communities. However, also key is to not the power dynamics within these workspaces in terms of who is in the boardroom and how many people are there. And that's why it's key for us to push as many women as possible to those positions, because as a loner voice in a boardroom, it's very difficult to take those decisions. And in most cases, people who are outside, for us who are outside, we don't know what is happening inside the boardroom and the bullying that is even happening there. In some cases, and this is not to excuse women who become violent and tend to protect violent and nature violent spaces, but it's also to think about ways in which they can be empowered inside those boardrooms, because if you're alone and you're trying to raise a voice and everyone else is against that agenda, even though you are in a leadership position, it's very difficult to influence policy. It's very difficult to influence decisions or whatsoever. So we must also be sensitive to that and already begin to think about ways of making those spaces transformative by pushing as many people who are progressive as possible to those spaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Lindy, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think very much as everybody has said, it is also about what we model. What does a female leader look like? And are we still trying to look like men in workplaces? Are we still trying to sound like men? I was in an interview yesterday when I was asked about vulnerability in leadership. Firstly, those questions often don't get asked of men. But the truth of the matter is they should be understanding these questions, because that's what leads to empathetic leadership. And empathetic leadership then opens itself to the possibility that there might be inherent biases, unfairnesses, and so forth that lead to a different experience for genders other than those of the industry captains. So I do think that we've really got to push the boundaries a little bit more, and we've got to model what we believe. It's true, Hlengi, where people are lonely in these spaces. I've had experiences where I was the sole female executive in various group executive forums in financial services, but I think the privilege of having the platform comes with a lot of responsibility, and there can be no escaping using your voice for the benefit of those who don't have a voice, who don't have the platform, who don't have the networks. There is a responsibility that comes with that. So you're there not just because technically you are appointed to a role, you are there to play a role for the greater good. We are in South Africa. South Africa requires different leadership, different solutions. As to the socialization, in much the same way as we understood as a country that is steeped in poverty and so forth, and the understanding of the importance of nutrition to a child to improve their learning outcomes, the understanding of early childhood development initiatives that are required, for instance, reading in early childhood and development, that came out of research. And we knew that it improves the throughput rate of students in high school if they have reading in early childhood development. It applies equally to this conversation. When we are talking about the foundational things that we teach, whether it's in natural science or whatever they call the subjects these days, it is important. If we are wanting to root our young people and socialize them, from a policy perspective, I do think that the government has got to support anti-GBV and a transformational society and a change in behavior by making it a policy intervention that we will provide the equivalent of what Nonkosi described as CPUT 101. We need to have a 101 in grade, not in grade 1, that talks to these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lindy. I think before I even invite Immaculate, you know, as we're speaking, I keep thinking about this because I also think it is some things of calling it out when you see it. Sometimes it's also as simple as that. And I think also not silencing women when they experience this behavior from other women, because I think often, as also a feminist myself, there's a certain expectation I have that everybody sees things the way I do. But then you quickly realize that may not necessarily be the case. And I think it's having those very clear, transparent conversations once we see it, because we are all occupying leadership spaces here. So we do have that power. Immaculate, please go ahead before we now start moving towards the commitments we are making. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I just really wanted to highlight the fact that as much as we would want to see women represented in positions, and we assume that by having a female body in these positions, we are going to see gender transformation and that these women can become advocates for gender equality. It is not necessarily the case. You need to have a woman who is transformed mentally, who sees the world differently, through a different lens. Because the same attributes that we complain about in male that might be feeding into gender-based violence, the women comes from the same society. She has also been socialized to be accepting, to be silent, to be not washing her linen in the dirty linen in public, and to somehow tolerate all this behavior. So yes, we should advocate for women, but we should also make sure that there are efforts put into place that leads to transformation, that leads to women that becomes advocate, and that can really address issues that can lead to a society that we all can look at tomorrow and say, yes, this is what we really have in mind. Otherwise, if we just push a woman-man agenda, I'm afraid that if there's no intentional program in place, we might not see any change, because unfortunately, we all come from the same home. That has led us to who we are today, and that has led us to us having this type of conversation. So it took a lot of work for all of us who are into this panel to be here, either from childhood or through the schoolings that we went through, or feeling agitated with the unfairness that took place. And that we need to put that also into consideration.
Now, as we are approaching really the end, we now need to maybe concretize a bit more what commitment looks like. And probably I will ask each of us as we give our closing remarks to reflect on what is commitment in terms of now pushing this agenda forward. And what I've heard, you know, from what we are all saying here is, one, the need to have place where we can share what we're all doing from our respective places. I also think the best practices, because for example, Immaculate, you've had experience with designing curricula, with making policy. When I look in my own institution, we don't necessarily have such policies, or they're not as clearly well put. So I think it's just seeing, if I was to start it within my own place or my own school, what do I need to lean on? So having maybe a collective resource base. And as we also think through what commitment is from our side, to also think about the role that the Shared Value Africa initiative can play, but also the role other organizations can play. Because as was said earlier, we do a lot of work with the United Nations Prime, which is the body that encourages universities to embed sustainability in their education. So it's just seeing how do we collectively come together so that the impact is larger. I think that's really the challenge for us. And probably I would just, call on each of us as we close to comment on that. Probably starting with Prof, and then I will call on you, on everybody else as we go along.
Firstly, can I ask all stakeholders to make sure that our research gets published in mainstream journals? Number one, as academics, we can do that. We are reviewers. We are writing for journals. We have to write this topic into social science. This is a first key thing we need to do. Secondly, let's support each other's research. Let's participate. Let's go and attend each other's events. Like Olebo Gengs, I can't wait to meet Professor Rachel Jukes again. I'm one of her greatest admirers. She is one of our best researchers ever. Support that research, publish each other's research, follow each other on academia and ResearchGate. Let's become an active academic community. Let's support the work Tiki does. Let's support Shared Value Africa initiative and see how can we help Tiki? How can we speak for her when she needs us? And other organizations like her. How can we participate in each other's programs? Let's invite each other. Let's be an active academic community. Let's put our money and our time where our mouths are. Let's speak, let's do it. Let's have more events like this. Let's follow Liz's page, is fantastic. Sexual Violence Research Initiative. Let's see what she's posting on there. Let's follow Safer Spaces. Let's be active. Let's not just talk about this. Let's show what we're doing, share what we're doing, and put it out there for each other to see. That's my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. I will come then to Oleboheng. What is a commitment that you would like to see from yourself and the rest of those represented here?
I think I agree with what Kone has just said. I think the most important thing is collaboration and to take away the perception of, having superstars in this area, for instance. I think we need to come together instead of wanting one individual, like I want to be the star of this conversation, right? I can't be the star of this conversation. I think we all have to come together and collaborate because this is something that is greater than all of us. So I think that's the most important thing. And I love the point that you made as well, Kone, about ensuring that our research is published, right? And I also would love to see a lot more of these kinds of conversations, even in for instance, the platform, The Conversation, right? Because that's a platform that a lot of people read, not just people from the academic community, but to ensure that these conversations are happening on platforms like that. I think that's very, very important. Also, I think the whole issue of the stakeholders seeing themselves in our research is very important. I think we need to, as academics, we get so caught up in just wanting to publish, just wanting to see, our research, but it's not necessarily research that's relevant to the stakeholders that we want to be involved in this conversation. So I think it's very important that we create research or that we do research that's relevant to the stakeholders that we want to be part of this conversation. So we have to ask them question, ask them what kinds of questions should we as researchers be asking, right? Make them part of this instead of just, because I don't, as academics, sometimes we can have big egos. For those of you who are academics and work with academics, that, sometimes it's, I want to see my name here or there, or, it's all about me, right? But the reality is we have to think what are the questions that are relevant to our stakeholders? And we have to ensure that those questions are answered by our research, and then make sure that that research is published and that research is seen, on platforms that the wider stakeholder group can have access to. So I think those are the things that need to be done.
Thank you very much indeed, Olebohe. I will then invite Nonkosi to give us, your observations on what we need to do moving forward from here.
Thank you so much, Mumbi. Okay, thank you, Mumbi. My parting shot is to reiterate the fact that we need, this platform for sharing of our practices, research agendas, and even our lessons. We need it. It's long overdue, and especially with our university.
Oh, Nonkosi, the internet is a challenge.
Integrate our SDGs. SDG 5 is a cross-cutting pillar, and we are really talking to others. The issue of also involving our young researchers as well as postgraduates who are doing, incredible amount of work in this kind of research is also critical, because it must be a research that also builds young researchers and also contributing to the research body knowledge base of GBV, even in gender equality and women empowerment in higher education space. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nonkosi. I'll call then on Elizabeth. What are the next steps from where you sit? What would you like us to do?
I would love this network, which is a passionate network of people who really want to advance programming and prevention of GBV in higher education institutions, to really address there is quite an absence of really good research being done on GBV in higher education institutions. So what we really need to do together, I think Kone highlighted the importance of publishing, and Olebohe highlighted the importance of making sure the research question is informed by and led by the people that can use that research. I think all of those things must be done, but we must be developing a research agenda that really does advance what we currently know. And I think that by doing and by getting together like this, sharing what's being done, and then developing a research agenda around that, and then advocating for more and better research resources to do this. But as academic institutions, you do have resources, and you can use those resources and to really advance this field in a way that can make a huge difference, both in country, regionally, and globally. And I really look forward to working with you as you do this moving forward. I'm really excited about this space. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I'm also very excited, and I'm looking forward to what we can do together. I'll come then to Immaculate once again, from where you sit, and again with your vast experience. I think I'm also very interested in the curriculum development. What do you want us to do?
I have learned that the university is a very political space. We might look at it as very safe, but it's very political in its various layers. And if you are in activism, if you are in gender work, you run the risk to burn out. You can burn out. So you need to really be clear, who are your allies within the university? From top to the lowest rank, who are your allies? Who are your allies if you want to push a particular curriculum? Whom can I call out if I say, look, there's a curriculum that needs to be developed for the education department, and we need to include issues of sexuality, we need to include issues of whatever. So we should really know who our partners are in the university from the tip of your finger. For example, when Vuyo's first contact with the university to invite us to this particular forum didn't come to me, it went to the social work department. And because of the Ally building, they said, nah, you must go to the MR where Immaculate is based. So it is really important to do that. And you need to have also people, I don't want to always like to use the word like-minded minds, but you need to have people on board who understand what it is that you are trying to achieve, either as a unit or so that you don't deal with egos, but you rather get the work done. For me, it's also, And yeah, so really, because I don't know, in the case of the University of Namibia, there is already a policy directive to gender mainstream. So that commitment is there. But you also need to be quite clear, where are you going to get your strategic people across the university to make sure that you get the work done. The place where I am based at this moment, which is the multidisciplinary research, we would really like to continue our collaboration with that started because of this forum. We would really like to see whether we can continue doing work. We have just collected data now on COVID-19 and gender-based violence, where we're mainly interviewing service providers and their experiences of gender-based violence during the lockdown. So we really want to look for avenues to continue doing amazing work and to co-teach, to supervise our students. And yes, I'm going to be a little bit of a disturber, because I'll continue touching on everyone and say, guys, can you continue doing some amazing work together and see where this can take us? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Immaculate, and thank you for agreeing to be a prompter, because I think we do need that. And thank you for what you've said, especially about finding those allies. I fully agree. It has also been my experience. I'll then go to Hengiwe. Just give us again what the commitments on your side look like, and how we can come together.
Thank you, Mumbi. We need to mobilize, organize, and participate. We need to be deliberate about our agenda. Where do we want to see ourselves? Where are we going with all the work that we're doing? We need to participate in all these different spaces where we're supposed to, because if we do not participate, our agenda stays outside of the room where decisions are being made. We need to, I agree with colleagues, we need to promote each other's work. We need to cite women and women's work, because it's so easier to cite a man writing about violence just because they are popular, they have that currency. But for your colleague, for a woman who's doing groundbreaking gender work, for them even to be known out there, we have to cite them in these academic spaces so that we make them relevant and we make their work relevant. For us to be in touch with our communities whenever doing our research, we need to be conscious as feminist researchers of not participating in textual violence, where we erase and silence the voices and the experiences of the women that we're working with, that are telling us their stories, because we must remember that in their everyday experiences, women are constantly dismembered. And when we take their stories and put them in our own ways, we participate in that dismembering in the everyday. So we need to center and re-center women's voices in all of this, in our publications and everything. And then when we want to get that work out there, let's cite each other, let's organize, let's participate in these spaces. University committees, transformation committees, let us all be there. We know that publications are a currency. For people to become head of departments, professors, and all of that, they need to be cited, they need to have work supervision and all of that work that's required. Let's organize, mobilize, and participate so that we can push our agenda forward, because when we are present, then we can push the agenda that we want. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, we have Lindy. Again, just you started the conversation. Perhaps now you can close it for the panel.
Thank you very much, Mumbi. I've just loved the commitments that have been made. I am moved by the passion, the commitment, the enthusiasm. And for my part, my commitment is let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's use the information that is there to make decisions and to drive programs of action that really help us to transcend and make a leap out of the space that we are in. I've got a 12-year-old daughter. She can't be telling the same stories that I am telling now. If I say I wrote a thesis on this 28 years ago, I don't want any other woman writing the same kind of thesis on her experience on sexual harassment and the absence of gender equity and equality in the workplace. It is on us. We can't be that generation that walked into freedom post-1994 and have not catapulted a whole other generation of women into freedom. So I do think that part of what we need to do also to collaborate is to provide safety for each other. We're a network, and I just absolutely love the convening power that Tiki has used to bring us all together. Sometimes to make the message heard, you need to use an ally. You need to call a Kone. I am, let's say, a group executive, stakeholder relations, communication, whatever, in a place. I'll say, I want to call an academic to speak to us on this. It neutralizes the inherent resistance that people have to hearing your voice advocating for the same things every day. That is the other use of collaborative networks and access. Let's open our networks to each other. You are being published on something. Remember, the research is not just, yes, for the sake of head of department and so forth. It is to serve as a useful catalyst of information and change and so forth in broader society. Allow people to use your information, to profile you, to give you a platform to talk about your work and why it's useful, where it is useful, so that we open up spaces for each other, for people, and ultimately we advance the cause of gender equality, gender parity, and elimination and eradication of gender-based violence and femicide. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lindy. I guess the challenge now is on us to move this forward, and I am personally very excited and happy to be working with such powerful voices. I know we're running short on time, so allow me to just now hand over to Vuyo Lutseke, who is the current director of the Shared Value Africa Initiative, and who really has brought us all here together and is a dear friend. So Vuyo, welcome, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mumbi, and thank you to this wonderful panel. What I've been loving is the endless, the ideas and concepts that are already coming to mind as we've been talking today. But I'm gonna be wrapping up shortly. Before I do so, it is my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today, which is Ambassador Nozipho January-Badil, who is going to be talking to us briefly about an upcoming book that she's launched. But briefly about Ambassador January-Badil, she wears many hats, but really she chairs the council for the University of the Nelson Mandela University, and also sits on the UN Global Compact local network in South Africa. But for us, she really is a great supporter of the SVAI and a great friend and inspiration to us all. And here today, she's talking about her book, Right to Speak. Ambassador Badil, if you're able to switch on your camera so I can, there we go. Thank you so much, Ambassador, over to you.
Thank you so much, Vuyo. And can I also thank Tiki for inviting me to participate in this conversation this morning. I didn't know that I would be able to. As we were continuing, I sort of just put everything else aside that was in my diary. So I want to thank each and every one of the panelists for really enlightening us on what is happening at the universities. Clearly, I also have a very personal interest in the issue of gender-based violence, but also a professional one as the chair of Council of the Nelson Mandela University. And there's certainly many tidbits that I will take back to the university in respect of changing
and adding more value to the policies there and our own efforts at addressing gender-based violence, not only within the student population, but also within the staff population, community and communities outside of the institution. It is quite daunting to be at the helm of a university's administration. And as you know, governance in university is another area that needs a lot of research on, because I think that the governance elements of universities are sort of taken for granted, and the real value and the power of what is possible at that level is not totally explored, but also, I believe, not particularly well understood. But that's besides the point. Thank you very much for the insights. I've really enjoyed listening and listening with interest and with the purpose of taking everything forward that you have shared. So my story really about the book is that I've always wanted to write. You know, I have written lots of things, reports, because I've been at, you know, in many organizations, and I've written reports. I've written a little bit of academics, writing here and there, had a chapter published in the book, etc. But I've never really written a full book. And this is not a book that I've written. I'm just talking at the moment about my desire to write. And last year when I turned 70, I thought, you know, can't just leave and stop working, because I had to leave one of my most important boards, Anglo Gold Ashanti, that I was on. Because I turned 70, I had to leave. I had done the 9 years what is it? The King report says we must only do 9 years and then we need to leave. And I'd done my years, and it was time to leave. And I thought, actually, you know what? This is such an opportunity to really make this dream deferred a reality. So shortly after that, COVID started, and in a sense, COVID gave the opportunity to fulfill the dream. But I thought I wouldn't just write about my story, I would write stories about African women leaders. And so it became a Pan-African project. And I was able to recruit 55 women from 23 African countries to write their own story of leadership. And it culminated in this book called Right to Speak, which I'll just quickly show you on the screen. And so we started it in March, invited the women. Many of them are very intimidated by the notion of writing, but then we gave them support. We got a ghostwriter to help some, others wrote themselves. It took a lot of editing, and we only finished it at the end of June. Now, selecting the women was quite a feat for myself, but also for the people who helped me do it. I did go to some friends to ask for advice, and they gave me good advice. And we have quite like Tiki, we have a network of women across the continent, women that I've known since my early days of working in NGOs, working in the public sector, and working in the private sector, and knowing people in entertainment, arts and culture, but also knowing people in diplomacy, and knowing people lots of young women who are also part of my life. So it's really it's a multi-sectoral, intergenerational, Pan-African compilation of stories. And the main purpose for me also was the fact that, you know, there's this myth that as Africans, we are more oral than we are writing society. There's a bit of truth in that stereotype, but it's not entirely truthful. I think the purpose for writing the book was really getting us to write and tell our own stories in our own words. Because we don't do as African women enough of that. The purpose was also to kind of create a history, you know, to create a history, a legacy, an archive, contribute to literature, stories by us for everybody. But then I also found myself, you know, having to self-publish it, because it was hard to get a publisher. And in the end, it was either I was going to do it myself or I was going to find a publisher to go along with me. But I knew in the end it would take more time. So I applied around for money, and I got some money from various private organizations. Not enough, but enough for us to start the book, and ended up self-publishing. And I learned a lot about publishing and how how it's made into a very rarefied, difficult kind of activity. But I don't know whether I'll do it again, I must say, because it was pretty hard. And so, yes, so the result is Right to Speak. You can get it on Amazon, for Kindle. I'm still trying to get exclusive books to sell it on their shelves, so I'm waiting for that, for them to okay that. But if you do get hold of it, please read the stories. They are really of women like you and me who are simply telling their story in a sense of, you know, this is what happened. This is what happened to me in these circumstances. And it covers women in civil society starting their own organizations, because it is about leadership. Women in sport who have battled through a male-dominated social activity in sport, women in the private sector, women in universities. Our own Vice Chancellor Sibongile Mutwa writes a story in there. Some academic people, women in academia in Kenya, women in entertainment, women in arts and culture, and only women in diplomacy. There are a couple of ambassadors who tell their stories of representation abroad. So yeah, so it really straddles quite a number of industries and disciplines. It's intergenerational. The youngest contributor is a 16-year-old matric student from St. Mary's School who tells about her own inherent leadership skills, and the oldest person is an 80-year-old woman who is coming to the end of her sort of formal life, formal activity, jobs in her world. And for me, it was literally a 70th birthday present to myself to also say, you know, we still have a lot to do, we still have a lot to say, and we can still facilitate a process like this one. And the whole idea is to say, how can we use the power of the pen instead of the power of the sword? And how can we continue to encourage Black African women, or all African women, to write their stories of their lives and just say what happened. Because in these stories are also lots of stories about gender-based violence in the family, gender-based violence in communities, gender-based violence in our societies, and gender-based violence in the workplace. It really straddles all of women's experiences in the multiple identities that they hold and that they carry. And it really is. Many of the women, I would say, in the book, wouldn't necessarily describe themselves as feminists, but when you read the stories, you know, their feminism definitely comes through. Thank you, Vuyo. Thank you, Tiki, for the opportunity. And once again, wish you a happy Women's Month to all you ladies on the call, even those who are not South African and so may not relate to Women's Month like we do. But we hope that these conversations will lead to the end of gender-based violence and femicide in our societies. Merci.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nazipo. We actually, just for everyone's information, we also will include in the mailer after today's session more information on how to get the book Right to Speak. So yeah. I have the very, very quick final word today, which is very hard to do because we've had such an engaging 2.5 hours with everyone, but really just to thank our amazing keynote speakers, Elizabeth and Lindy, and not just setting the context with your very unique perspectives, but also just contributing to the panel as well with our very respective institutions, where again, we're talking about really the power of academia as a collective, you know, to use the research agenda, but other, you know, resources that you have within the sector to help empower not just the movement across the board against gender-based violence, but also to collaborate with others. Right, the power of research to influence policy also means to help others in implementing, in really driving the change we need to drive in fighting gender-based violence, in addressing issues of gender equality across our society. And the great thing is having this conversation as a collective across borders, right, including our, you know, our universities from Kenya, Namibia, etc. So for us, while today's conversation is ending, it actually is a start of action, of how can we take today's conversation forward, right? We had our great distinguished panel today, but it actually is for all academia to participate in this network, to participate and contribute to how together we can work and take this forward. So what we do as the SVAI through the It's Not Okay movement is facilitate conversations like this, convene conversations like this, but it is on you as the ones with the power, with the academic power to drive it and take it on board. And we are absolutely very excited and honored that you all have joined us today, especially also our attendees who were very active and also quite insightful as well in the chats that we have. So for us, like I said, we're putting the challenge back to everyone, attendees and panelists, on how we can take this further. We will be in touch with the recordings and further details on this today, but also we are here to hear from you as to what more we can do to take this further. I invite everyone to please visit our website, itsnotok.africa. Pledge. There are also other resources there on how you in your own organization, community, or with your peers, you can keep the conversation going around against gender-based violence. But also, as I mentioned earlier, let's keep this door open. Let's keep the conversation going as how we can all play a role and how we can all participate in doing so. We are out of time. So I just wanted to really have a final word of thank you. Thank you to Mumbi, our great moderator today. Thank you, Tiki, for again bringing us together for today's session. And again, thank you to everyone, Lindy, Corney, Immaculate, Nongosi, Hlengiwe, Uleboheng, and of course, our technical team behind the scenes. And of course, yes, not forgetting Liz as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day further. We really will look forward to keeping the community going and keeping the conversation going.
City lengos, Emma Tota Sabela.